Thursday, we've got Big Ten action. Penn State, Purdue meeting in West Lafayette. The Boilermakers coming off a 9-4 season, finishing 2021 with a win over Tennessee, 4-1 in their final 5 games, including a win over then number 3 Michigan State, while the Nittany Lions stumbled down the stretch. But head-to-head, they've won 9 straight against Purdue. Penn State coming in as the favorites at -3.5. Purdue 20-8 though against the spread as underdogs under head coach Jeff Brom. Well, let's bring in our quarterback, Brady Quinn. Penn State seems like a big question mark going into the year at the moment. James Franklin, of course, getting that big extension back in November. But again, a 7-win season. What is their trajectory right now under Franklin?
It's really hard to tell. Look, this is a university that typically recruits well and develops well. They'll send plenty of players off to the NFL level. I believe they got somewhere around 34, 33 players right now on NFL rosters. So it's not a lack of talent or the ability to develop. There's just a disconnect. And it's been really inconsistent over the past couple of seasons. I know, look, COVID played a role in 2020, but they lost 5 straight to start that season, then finished out on a win streak, and that was 2020. 2021, they got off to a hot start. They won 5 straight, then actually ended up losing 6 of their next 8. So it's hard to really get a sense for what exactly the disconnect is. I think it really points more to the offensive side of the ball. Their offensive line play has at times been atrocious. They haven't had much of a running attack or a consistent one to say that. The protection has been terrible at times. Last year gave up the most sacks in the Big Ten. Then you look at Mike Yurcich, their play caller. Just from breaking down a lot of their games, it seems disjointed. It seems disconnected, almost like they don't know exactly what their identity is and what they want to hang their hat on. And I think that's tough for Sean Clifford to play consistent as well, because some of his play has been inconsistent. So to me, it all points to one side of the football, and it's just about the offense figuring it out. And until they do that, it's going to be hard for them to compete with the likes of a team like Ohio State or like Michigan, who won the Big Ten last year, and obviously are in the same division.
Yeah, the one thing they do have, it seems like, on their side definitively is history. Again, 9-0, looking for their 10th straight win against the Boilermakers there. Purdue hasn't won against Penn State since the Kyle Orton era, so it's been a while. Now, Penn State's defensive coordinator Brent Pry takes the big job at Virginia Tech, so in comes Hurricane head coach Manny Diaz. Any concern there, considering Diaz's Canes were 85th in points per game allowed in his final season in Coral Gables?
No, I mean, look, that was a different scenario. I think the writing was a bit on the wall there in Miami. And as far as, the scheme and system he was trying to put in, that's more the question mark. When you look at James Franklin over his head coaching tenure, he's always had Brent Pry with him. And that's been their mainstay. That's been the cornerstone of their success, has been the defensive success, whether at Penn State or at Franklin, and the consistency of it. So with Pry not being there, you're bringing in a guy in Manny Diaz who, different scheme, different way of going about getting pressure. Penn State a lot of times has relied on a lot of their edge rushers to be able to get home and get the pressure they're looking for. Manny Diaz has a lot of times dialed it up using edge pressure, so sacrificing some of those players you have in coverage and instead forcing them to get after the quarterback and get the football out. How would that play out in Penn State? We're about ready to find out. Nonetheless, though, interesting hire. You thought Manny Diaz might take a step back, take a year off before he got back into coaching. Instead, went straight to Penn State with James Franklin, and I think wanted to stay within it. So, look, it's a talented roster as far as we'll go what Penn State has. It just comes down to how these pieces fit within a scheme.
All right, let's switch things over to the offensive side of the ball. 2 quarterbacks in this game, both 6-year seniors. We'll save our Van Wilder jokes for later. Let's start with Sean Clifford, who you mentioned earlier for Penn State. He could set some program records this year, but do you see him finishing the year as QB1 there in State College?
Yeah, I don't think there's any reason to think he wouldn't. The questions so much to me aren't really Sean Clifford and his ability. I think it's more of the offensive line play. Can they be better up front, provide some balance with the rushing attack, and give better protection? Now, look, part of that's on Mike Yurcich, too, to develop a scheme, too, that doesn't hang Sean Clifford out to dry. But the other thing is, they got some big shoes to fill on the outside with Jahan Dotson moving on to the Washington Commanders. Parker Washington looks to be the player to replace him. He's the sophomore that everyone's kind of been talking about and raving about so far heading into the season. And then Mitchell Tinsley, he's the Western Kentucky transfer that also has gotten some buzz too. So those 2 players in particular are going to be guys that they go to in those big-time spots, like Sean Clifford used to go to last year in Jahan Dotson to make those game-winning plays in a lot of their 7 wins.
We mentioned the finish that Purdue had last year, and a lot of that has to do with Aiden O'Connell their starting quarterback, third among starting QBs in the country in passing yards a season ago. Is his stock rising both as a college passer and as someone maybe keep your eye on who could have a future in the NFL?
100%. For starters, you got to remember Jeff Brom, his head coach, played in the NFL. He's got experience, playing at the professional football level. I think he does a tremendous job of preparing his quarterbacks to understand the game, understand what they're trying to accomplish with their scheme and game planning week in and week out. So Aiden O'Connell's going to be prepared mentally. The other thing you have to look at is he can make all the throws. I mean, he really can, hit the deep ball, layer throws in that second level, and obviously is extremely accurate. I mean, you'd be hard-pressed to find a better quarterback in the Big Ten, and yes, that includes C.J. Stroud, down the stretch last season, the last 5 games. He was averaging 432 yards a game, 19 touchdowns, only 3 interceptions. He was incredible and really capped it off with a huge win in their bowl game versus Tennessee. So, I think Aiden O'Connell's one of those sleepers that you're not hearing a lot of buzz about right now, but you will after the season and once we get the draft time and being maybe that mid-round guy or a guy who creeps up a little higher than that. But I think he's the second best quarterback in the Big Ten. I do think he's prolific. And again, not kind of going based off of what we talked about with Penn State, but they had questions about who that number 1 wide receiver is. So does Purdue. David Bell has moved on now to the NFL level. And then Milton Wright was claimed to be academically ineligible. So who's that going to be for Purdue? Charlie Jones, the Iowa returner wide receiver, he transfers in along with Tyrone Tracy. He's potentially, those guys are looking to potentially be part of it. Elijah Cannon was a transfer from Auburn. So clearly Purdue is looking for answers there. The one reliable target is going to be Payne Durham, their tight end. Big target, especially in the red zone. He's a guy they like to go to. You'll see Aiden O'Connell hooking up with it early and often until they find that piece on the outside of wide receiver.
All right, Brady Quinn will be there at the game. Again, that one kicking off tomorrow night, Penn State and Purdue. We'll see if that O'Connell buzz will continue. If he can beat Penn State and end that streak, I'm sure it'll be there. Thank you, Brady, for joining us. Reminder, check out the Cover 3 podcast for the latest on college football. This week, a preview of Week 1, plus a look back at Week 0 and that Nebraska loss in Ireland to Northwestern and what that could mean for Scott Frost. Don't forget to check out the Fantasy Football Today Draftathon coming your way later tonight. 6 hours of draft advice, sleepers, much more. Get all the info you need from our experts while supporting the St. Jude's Children's Research Hospital.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.